Welcome in the latest episode of the Five on the Floor podcast on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We kind of call it the 5 off the floor during the shutdown, but continuing to try to give you 3 or 4 episodes a week. We appreciate all of our sponsors. Also, check out 5reasonsports.com. Spell it out, F-I-V-E, reasonsports.com. Why? Because we've got great NFL draft content there. 3 Yards Per Carry, our Dolphins podcast, our Dolphins property. They also call it the Extra Yard. Release their final mock draft today, so check that out. See who they have. The Dolphins picking number 5. I think you'll be pleased. Also, check out my column, which was titled today, "Hey Dolphins, Be the Heat." So for Heat fans, I think you'll take some glee in that, because basically I'm suggesting the Dolphins finally do what they should have done years ago, which is follow the Riley way. So check out that column. And, of course, our big draft preview, 7,500 words from our Simon Clancy and Alfredo Arteaga, with the top 5 of every position and a YouTube video attached for every single one of those prospects. So you want to find out what a player looks like, what he plays like, check out our stuff. Unlike the other guys, our stuff is free. Also, check out our great sponsor. I'm going to snack on it after I finish my pizza here. I ordered from Christopher's Bakery last week. It was a great decision. You can find them on Twitter at Nilla Wafer Cakes, or go to the website, which is christophersbakery.com/5 reasons. Why 5 reasons? And again, that's spelled out F-I-V-E, because if you type in the coupon code 5 reasons, again spelled out, you get 15% off. So that's what I did, and I ordered their signature product, which is a vanilla wafer cake, but I got the chocolate chips on it because my daughter likes it, and it was created 30 years ago. This is, again, a family business, a South Florida business. The bakery, Christopher's Bakery, is named after the brother of our friend Courtney Harris, who died of a seizure at just 11 years old. And so they've partnered with Miami Nicholas Children's Hospital and set up a fund where they donate a portion of all sales to epilepsy neuroscience research, since that's where Christopher spent much of his young life. So it's a great cause, and I can tell you it's a terrific cake. I don't know if it's still going to be here by the time my daughter gets here later this week. They ship all over the country. Usually they can hand deliver in South Florida. Obviously can't do that right now, but I was able to get it very quickly here through the mail, through UPS. So check that out. Again, christophersbakery.com/5 reasons. And now, today's episode.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a Miami Heat and NBA podcast from Ethan Skolnick with Alphonse Sidney, a.k.a. Alf954. Brought to you by the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, Ethan Skolnick back. We've got the whole crew today, Alphonse Sidney and Alex Toledo. Going to have an episode with myself and a 45-minute conversation with Shane Battier. That's going to post likely tomorrow as part of our Heat Stories series. He tells the entire story, guys, of the speech that set off, as he said, created the 27-game winning streak, as it came after the first win in Toronto when they were all stuck up there watching the Super Bowl. Shane told me basically how drunk he was, what LeBron and Wade looked at him like on the bus when he started this speech, and essentially everything, most of the things that he said. So it's a lot of fun. He also had a great line today where I asked him about the transition in the 2012 playoffs when Bosh was out, and he said, we had Dexter Pittman at the 5 and me at the 4, which is likely the worst front court of a team that eventually won a championship, which is probably true. Actually, I didn't do the research on it, but that sounds about right. So really good stuff on
There's got to be. Can you think of a worse one?
I mean, it's no offense to Shane, and I don't want to take shots at Dexter. I really liked Dexter personally, but that thing lasted about 4 minutes of that game, and that was it. And Spo pretty much threw up his hands, and that was the end of it. And remember what happened in the next series? Bosh came back, so Battier went back in the starting lineup at the 4, and the rest is kind of history. Shane kind of by accident became a revolutionary as a small ball 4, but they weren't planning that. But yeah, it was pretty bad. I really liked Dexter, but he just was not an NBA player.
And then somebody thought it was a good idea to put Kendrick Perkins on Shane Battier.
We discussed that as well. We also discussed.
That's my favorite thing. When you go back and really look at it, like you had 3 future MVPs, but you ruined it by putting Kendrick Perkins on Shane Battier. and being really stubborn about it.
We talked about that. We also talked about Shane begging Spo to let him play Game 7 of the Indiana series that year, and not getting in the game. But that was 13, actually. Not getting in the game at all, and kind of the way he reacted to that. Of course, we know how he came back in the finals and what he did in Game 7.
What do you call it? A turd sandwich? A shit sandwich?
It was a turd sandwich. But I didn't know the detail of how he had begged Spo. Like he told me that he wanted to play that game, but he basically told me, he said, before that Game 7, I told Spo, just get me in somewhere. I don't care. I know I've been shooting poorly. Give me a few minutes. And then Spoelstra emptied the bench with everybody but Shane, and he didn't.
And it's funny. We talked about that a little bit pre-show that sometimes Spo seems like he's a little bit blind to some of these things, where he's so in tune to the game and what's going on that he doesn't look for those little moments for a guy like Shane, and which is why it was surprising to me in the last game in Brooklyn, where he gave Udonis a ton of minutes. Because sometimes I think Spo just kind of just goes blind to those things because he's so focused on the game in itself. And honestly, it probably was good for the Heat that they were out of playoff contention at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So Spo was not 100% laser focused on making the playoffs instead of having that moment, because we would have never got that UD shot for the triple-double, which is a great shirt, a classic moment. Melo, LeBron, CP3 standing up, getting all excited about it. Like that moment was classic, and it's one of those things where I feel like Spo has been blind to in the past, and I think that Shane story kind of encapsulates that.
Well, remember when Dwayne came back with the Bulls and he forgot to get Udonis in the game of that? Right? Like
it's amazing. You know what's funny? And this is such a low level of what we're talking about, like microscopic, but from someone coaching youth basketball, like you'll have a kid that you want to get into the game, and the game is over before you even realize it.
Right.
And you just like don't even realize, like, oh shit, man, this kid, the kid who who looks funny and can't dribble, like I forgot to get him in the game, for the last 2 minutes, like we're blowing the other team out. But you don't think about those things in the heat of the moment. So I don't understand Spo, because listen, my fourth grade youth basketball team is not on the level of the Miami Heat, but I will say that I understand that there is something to being so wrapped up in the emotion and the pace of the game that you just forget things. But it's funny when you hear Shane talk about it, because like and we've heard that about Spo before.
Well, so it was a frustration of the role players, particularly during the Big Three. I mean, it can be said now. I mean, it wasn't just Shane. I mean, I would sit there in the locker room with Mike Miller and James Jones pretty much before every game. It was kind of like, the two guys in the Muppet Show. What are they? Is it Waldorf and Astoria or something like? The two old guys that always. This reference.
Yeah.
Okay, the two old guys who sat up. Sort of.
That reference was actually a pretty recent one. When people were discussing the Democratic primary, they were comparing those two to Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden.
Pretty much, that's who they are, right? Exactly. Except probably, well, I'm not gonna get political, but yeah, that's similar. And so you basically had, I mean, that's the situation where it's just like, I just totally lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Hold on, I'm sorry. I totally lost my train of thought.
About Mike Miller and James Jones?
Oh, yeah.
We're keeping all this, by the way. I don't care.
You can keep it. Nobody's listening to this. No, they are listening to this. Hopefully for our great sponsors. No, okay, I got my train of thought back. So James Jones and Mike Miller, that's kind of what it was. It was like they were like the peanut gallery. Like I'd come in the locker room and, LeBron would be getting ready, walking in and out. Dwayne would be sort of icing his knee. CB would be reading a book, okay? Ray would be avoiding the media for as long as he could. So he'd come in. And so I would just talk to JJ and Mike, particularly on the road. And it was a lot of complaints about not knowing their roles, not knowing where they were supposed to play, and all the rest of it. And they were both total professionals about it. And now James Jones is literally the general manager of an NBA team. And I'm not surprised by that. But it was just funny because they were always complaining about that with Spo, and they were not the only ones. I mean, Rio, others, about this communication thing. But I think sometimes it's not even intentional from Erik. Like you said, I just think
it's not intentional.
He just gets wrapped up. He's also a little bit confrontation averse generally. And so I think that plays into it, although he's had his moments with certain guys, and with Jimmy has spoken about the moments they've had already, which have been very positive. But yeah, sometimes I sort of loses touch. All right, well, listen, let's get into what we wanted to get into today, which is
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, do you think he's gotten better? Because I think he's gotten better. And this is just listen, I'm not in the locker. I mean, I'm in the locker room, but I don't have like close relationship. I was about to say I'm not in the locker room.
Nobody's in the locker room anymore.
Yeah, but I don't have a lot of close relationships with these guys. But do you think, because I hear what these guys say nowadays, and it doesn't sound like the big 3 years where Spo was kind of like Sheldon from Big Bang Theory and he was almost a robot. But now it seems more like he talks to the guys a lot more and is a lot more communicative. Like, do you think he's better now?
I think so. I think part of the reason is they've developed a lot of these guys. I think there's more of a connection to those guys than when you bring in a Mike Miller from somewhere else, or some of the vets that he brought in who maybe had been coached a different way. A lot of these guys have only known the Heat system, right? So it's easier to kind of – and plus, Erik is sort of a minted man now, right? Like he's won a couple championships, and he's the second longest tenured coach in the NBA.
I think that's the difference right there. I think the difference there is the comfort. Like, he knows his position. He's not getting fired. Like, when Erik Spoelstra leaves the Miami Heat, it's going to be on his own terms. So the pressure of the Big Three era is not there.
Mm-hmm.
And so now he can be more of himself, and he can be more – because he is a guy who's very relatable to players. Like,
yes.
He's not that much older. He's into a lot of the same things as far as music, fashion, shoes. Like, he's a Jordan connoisseur. So it's kind of he
was wearing the backwards cap for years. He's still doing that. Every time I saw him shoot around, he was wearing the backwards cap.
But now that's really not being relatable. But to today's
that's my generation. I mean, again, I think of it because Erik's like 2.5 years older than me, and I remember, I was around when I was 24 and he was 26. So I remember him from all the way back there when he was kind of much lower on the totem pole.
I do think he has a lot of relatable qualities. That was one of the things where I was always confused as to why. There's some of the things he would rub guys the wrong way, because you would think that he was like, could be young, hip coach. But I think he takes his job so seriously. And the Big Three era was just such a pressure-packed, pressure chamber that he almost couldn't be himself. I feel like right now he is absolutely 100% himself. I think we see it in the press conferences. I think nobody's seen it more than Alex this past season. Nobody's gotten to know Spo better in what 75% of the season Alex has. But I'm sorry to derail the episode. I find that part of Spo's evolution very fascinating.
No expectations, man. That's what no expectations does to a man like Erik Spoelstra. Looking younger than ever. I mean, you said he's 2.5 years older than you, Ethan?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow, he looks great for his age.
Oh, wow, what the hell does that mean? What the hell does that mean? Everybody says I look younger than my age, and you're like, oh, he's 2.5 years older than me. Come on.
No, you don't.
That was a straight up shot.
But that, like the Spo thing, was just like, oh wow, he's even younger than I thought.
He's starting to lose a little on the top. I mean, I already have, but he's starting to lose a little on top. And he's not Jewish, so he doesn't have an excuse. But I will tell you, I'm not going to share a lot of it, but we texted. He and I did after the press conference that he had about a week and a half ago. Not press conference, but it wasn't even a Zoom call. It was just a conference call with us. And we texted back and forth about some things. The only thing I will reveal is he loves our no obstacles shirt. I will tell you that. There are no obstacles. There are obstacles, but there are none shirt, which is on our website, which is a Pat Riley quote. He loves that shirt. So, I mean, he has a sense of humor. I think the thing about Spo is there are really two Erik Spoelstras. I've said that for years. I think what Alf is mentioning is that I think those two have blended a little bit more. Like, I always knew two totally different people. I knew the person who was at the press conference, and I knew the person who I would run into on the court after a game who would be honest. Okay? I think now that he's in his own skin, he's honest more of the time. publicly because I think he can be. But I do think a lot of it has to do, and I don't mind us derailing the episode a little bit with this. I think a lot of it has to do, it's not just him being more comfortable in his own skin. I also think it's the type of players they have now. I mean, again, Duncan Robinson, they developed, right? Kendrick Nunn's never played an NBA level before. Tyler Hero never played an NBA level before. Derek Jones loves it here because they basically made him a player with his help, obviously. So all of these guys owe something to Spo. When you were dealing with more crusty veterans, especially smart crusty veterans, a lot of whom they had, sometimes they didn't click with Spo. Ray is the best example of that, okay? Ray is one of those people who he's very bright, okay? But he also, believes he's the smartest person in the room. And I actually had a long conversation with Ray about this because I did a big piece for Bleacher Report because I basically thought that the Heat team that they assembled, that 12-13 team, was one of the smartest teams in NBA history, just intellectually, right? You had James Jones, Chris Bosh, Ray Allen, Shane Battier. Start there, okay? Just start with those four.
Yeah.
UD's no dummy. Okay. And is as street smart as anybody you'll ever find. All right. And LeBron has a photographic memory. So just start and a brain for business. Just start with those six. Okay. There were no dumb guys in that room. I mean, Rio got a hard time. Rio's not a dumb guy. Okay. They had some dumb guys in that locker room over the years. So I did a story where I talked to those core guys about what it is to be a smart guy in an NBA locker room and what that's like. And Ray basically said, sometimes I rub coaches the wrong way. And we saw that at the end with Spo. He clashed with Spo that last year because when you're bright and you have a certain idea about how things should be done, you may disagree with the guy who was actually setting the agenda. And I think that happened at times with that team, and I think that made it harder for Spo. I'm not saying that the Heat don't have a smart group now, but they've got kind of a young, naive group, right? So they're not fully formed in their adulthood or their opinions.
They have guys who are more malleable, and also Spo is more malleable.
Correct.
And they have a guy in Jimmy Butler who 100% thinks, and he's like I'm not saying he's a Spo clone, but when it comes to the intensity on the basketball court, like that intensity is just out of control.
And I was about to say the same thing. Like that's the one guy who probably wasn't perceived as malleable at all coming into the situation. And it's like Jimmy absolutely believes in Spo. I think that's as far as what we've seen so far. Like he is 100% in, and so it's like Spo probably feels as comfortable as he ever has.
He told his agent, I can reveal this. He told his agent the first week of camp that he was testing Spo a little bit. And after the first week, he told his agent, that's the smartest coach I've ever played for. I'm not testing him anymore.
Wow.
Hoiberg is going to be pissed.
What's that?
Hoiberg is going to be pissed.
Maybe. But he tested him. He tested him a little bit. I mean, he was still doing the get up at 5:30 and 3:30 in the morning thing, but he tested him a little bit. And Erik's been through enough. And look, Erik is intellectual in that way, but he also is tunnel visioned at times. Erik does this other thing where this is turning into a Spo episode, but that's fine. Erik does this other thing where you'll be talking to him about something. This happened to me many times where I would talk to him on the side after he did the general press conference because I had something to run by him. And I would bring something up, and the conversation would go somewhere else, and I would keep talking. And like 4 minutes after I said something, he would start talking about the thing that I brought up 4 minutes earlier. It's like it's still in his head. Like the wheels were still turning on how he wanted to answer something I said 4 minutes before. So I think sometimes players who are not used to that, they think he's ignoring them. He's not. It's like he's processing it. When you spend enough time around someone like that, and I've spent a lot of time around him, you kind of figure out how his brain works. I kind of figured out LeBron, pretty quickly in the first 3-4 months and what LeBron would respond to. I think Spo and LeBron actually have a lot in common that I don't think that necessarily LeBron wanted to acknowledge until LeBron was gone. It's a fascinating character study. But anyway,
what? I think that's a very interesting statement right there.
I think the way that they process information, I think that it's the look that they give you when you've clicked on something that I got for both of them. And to be honest, and I was told this before, and actually we talked about this on some of those Jimmy Chronicle episodes we had, Jimmy is a lot like LeBron. One of the things that the people around him told me, and especially the reporters like Vinny Goodwill and Casey Johnson and the guys Keith Pompey, who've developed relationships with him, John Krasinski, they told me, they said, you'll think Jimmy's not hearing everything and seeing everything that's in the room. He hears everything. He knows who's asking the questions. He knows who he wants to give a good answer to and who he doesn't. I picked that up with LeBron at the very beginning. LeBron would do this thing with the group where I didn't think he knew me very well, but then there were a couple of us, Mike Wallace, myself, and a couple others, who he would, when you asked a question, you got a better answer. You could ask the same damn question that somebody he didn't like asked, you would get a better answer. And I remember us, since we're going to talk about Jordan in this episode, I remember us being at the All-Star game in Houston for Jordan's 50th. It was Jordan's 50th birthday. So the whole weekend was about Jordan and his 50th birthday. The whole weekend, okay? And LeBron was sick of it, okay? And that was when you used to have availability both days. So Friday and Saturday. So by the time it got to Saturday, you had all the international media. You guys saw how that – well, you saw how that was, Alex. You get all the international media, everybody asking him to say hello to my friends in Belgium, okay? And all of that stuff, and everybody asking him MJ. And finally, LeBron just looked at them, and he looked at me and Wallace. He stopped because we were sort of parked aside. He looked at me and Mike Wallace. He said, you guys have anything? And we're like, I mean, literally, this was at a group.
Ask me a question.
You asked me, right. And, you know, I'm not, this is not to boast or anything. It's just to say that he was looking for somebody who would at least try to communicate with him like he was a human being, not just a quote board. And I think with Erik, there are some similarities there too. Do
you guys remember that at one point in the Big Three era, probably end of the second season and most of that third season and the fourth season, LeBron just started sounding exactly like Erik.
Yeah.
It was, and then even afterwards, he still sounds like a Heat player.
Wasn't he saying he spoke quotes like in Cleveland?
Yeah, he was still exactly.
The whole first year he was repeating Spo. The whole first year.
Thing is the main thing.
Yeah, well, that's a Rileyism. But yes, a lot. You know, half of the Spoisms are Rileyisms. Okay, so although I think the number may be a little less than that now because Erik has developed his own vernacular. But for a while, a lot of things that Spo said, LeBron said. I mean, excuse me, Riley said. And so yeah, by extension, LeBron started saying Riley things, but they were really Spoelstra. They started saying Spoelstra things, but they were really Riley things. But I do think what was fascinating about that was I remember the first year with LeBron and Spo, like Spo won Coach of the Year one month and LeBron wouldn't address it. Like that's the biggest fluff. You know, you win Coach of the Year because you had the most wins that month. There's nothing else that goes into it. There's no panel. There's no nothing. This guy had the most wins. He's Coach of the Month. And so the reporters, I forgot where we were, but the reporters were trying to stir something up, but they were trying to get LeBron to say something nice about Spo winning Coach of the Month, and he would not say it. Like they kept circling back to it, and he would not say it. And when I look from where they were in 2010, 2011 to where LeBron was without Spo, but basically parroting Spo, everything he said, not parodying, but parroting. In 2014, 2015, it was remarkable, the transformation. I think LeBron developed a lot more respect for Spo after he had to deal with David Blatt. After he sort of had to, who called himself I was there for this. He called himself a fighter pilot. David Blatt was a disaster as an NBA head coach. I think LeBron kind of realized that. And actually, I know we talked a lot about something else, but this is a great transition. So after the break, everybody's talking LeBron and MJ today. So we're going to talk that.
All right, guys, before we get back to the show, I want to welcome everybody to our newest sponsor, Apollo Leaf. Okay? Apollo Leaf provides top-of-the-line premium CBD extracted and then formulated for maximum benefit. Apollo Leaf offers unique products like their sleep sprays and energy sprays, which are especially useful for this current turbulent time, right? People ask me all the time, Alf, why CBD? Well, CBD benefits include anxiety reduction, increased focus, sleep assistance, pain relief, and more. Apollo Leaf is based out of Miami, so they're local, and they only source ingredients from top farms in the USA. Apollo Leaf uses broad-spectrum CBD that includes all the benefits of the cannabis plant, but removes all the THC. So go now to www.apolloleaf.com and use code HEAT at checkout for 25% off your first order. That's right, guys. The code HEAT, H-E-A-T, your favorite basketball team, and that's 25% off at Apollo apolloleaf.com. APOLLO leaf.com. Now back to the episode.
All right, back here on Five on the Floor. Now, what we were supposed to talk about today was The Last Dance. All three of us watched it, episodes 1 and 2?
Yep.
Okay. First episode was, I thought that the way they've put this together was interesting. It's chronological, but it's not, right? Like, so it's supposed to be about the last season, the 97-98 season, that the Bulls were together. It's supposed to be about that, but there's a lot of kind of going back in time. So over the course of 2 episodes, the second episode was really more the Scottie Pippen episode. But the 2 episodes kind of, you get that, but you also got some of Jordan's childhood. You got Jordan with Dean Smith and Roy Williams and James Worthy and Sam Perkins at Carolina. You got Jordan in the 63-point game against a bunch of future head coaches of the from the Boston Celtics. Rick Carlisle, what's his mommy? That was one of the best lines. I think that was
Oh my God.
Was that Tommy Heinsohn who said that? I think it might have been.
That might have been the best line from like both of the parts. I was like, wow, they did him dirty. They did him dirty.
Well, I think the best lines, that one, the Scottie Pippen, "You're not gonna fuck my summer up," was pretty good. And then
Carlisle only played 3 minutes in that game. I saw it today, and they put that in the damn documentary.
Oh, that's so bad. His hairline was exactly the same. And James Worthy,
Jim Carrey over there.
Yeah, James Worthy, who came out and said, "I was the best player on the team for about 2 weeks," which actually was not true. Worthy was the best player that whole first. That Worthy was great. I mean, Worthy
is so
underrated, incredible.
Oh, God.
One of the best playoff performers of all time, and the best third wheel of all time, in my view, the best.
Oh, that's
not even close. It's not even close.
It's not. Chris Bosh is second.
Now you also have to think there were times where he was better than Kareem that late in their careers.
Yes.
I mean, that late in Kareem's career and that early in James's career, there were times that he was better than Kareem.
Yeah.
But people don't remember that because Kareem's body of work is so excellent. And and I just want to address the fact that people have been coming at me all day on Twitter about my 80s basketball takes. Guys, I watched basketball in the 80s, right? I'm old. I'm 39 years old. So I was born in 1981. I remember the Lakers winning in 1986 or 87. I can't remember. I remember. But my first championship I ever watched was Magic winning with the Lakers. So I do remember the 80s basketball, and it was the defense was trash, but we can get into that later.
Yeah, it was bad. We're going to get into that now, actually.
But yeah, James Worthy was an amazing basketball player. Like on the break, his athleticism, and that's one of the things we'll talk about, the athleticism of some of these guys, the distance between a guy like James Worthy and Danny Ainge, who Danny Ainge was considered an elite basketball player at the time. The athletic distance between the best of the best and some of these flat-footed guys was so far, where now in today's game, you're not going to see that big of a difference between even the most elite player and the last guy on the bench. Everybody's a great athlete. Mm-hmm. But I will say that about like James Worthy. James Worthy was every fast break sequence you see, and Magic is doing something fancy. It's off to James Worthy, and he's finishing, and he's ridiculous.
He was one of the best finishers of all time. I mean, the way that he would fill the lane, he could have played in any era. I mean, I think in this era, he would have developed his jumper a little bit more in this era.
So one last question about Worthy, since you guys said that take. So you would put him over Bosh, Clay, Draymond, Rodman, any of those guys as the best third man ever?
Yes.
Because
he honestly wasn't even the third best at times. He was the second best.
Right, and Kareem had declined some, so you got to take that into consideration. But I think if you got Riley, this might be an interesting question for him sometime. I think if you got Riley in an honest moment, and you had to pick one of the third wheels, and again he coached against a bunch of them, and then he brought in Bosh and he coached Worthy. I think he'd pick James. It's no disrespect to Bosh, who was tremendous, and even the pod I did today with Battier, he called Bosh the best pick and roll defender in the league, which we've talked about. Chris could have carried teams offensively, no question, but it was the level that Worthy did it at year after year after year in the postseason. I mean, they called him Big Game James for a reason.
Yep.
I mean, we call Big Shot Bosch, but I mean, that was for mostly regular season stuff. And we talk about the rebound, but
if James Worthy had his own team, he would have been one of those Bernard King types.
Yeah.
Where he put up, tremendous numbers in a losing effort.
But that's how ridiculous that Lakers. Again,
exactly.
It's just ridiculous. I mean, Byron Scott was their 4th or 5th best player, and Byron Scott, when he was with the Clippers before he was traded, was their leading scorer, averaging like 23, and could have been a leading scorer on 15 teams in the league. And he was their 4th option. And at times, when they had Michael Thompson or when Cooper was on, he was their 6th option. So that team was insane.
So this 80s, this 1980s that you guys speak of, it really just sounds like, what comes before this era that we're in right now is just, these high scoring games. And then you talk about the Lakers and Celtics and the type of talent that they had and what you're describing right now. It really just sounds like what the Warriors had. And like, it sounds like
without the 3-point shooting,
it's
3-point shooting, though.
And I will, and I think this is what we're going to get into next. This is what we're going to get into next is the defensive schemes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, listen, moving the ball around the perimeter would send defenses into a scramble back in '85, bro.
Yeah.
Like, everyone would lose their shit. Like, what? They're swinging the ball all the way around the court. Like, a skip pass was like, what is happening? like we have to realize like what the difference was. And remember the illegal defense and like everyone talks about hand checking, but the fact that you couldn't play zone back in the 80s made things like you had to stick to your man. So if there's a guy like Jordan, like you have to send that double team so early, like before he even makes a move. Like you have to send a double team as soon as he gets the ball.
And yet at the end of that sequence, the one you're talking about where the Celtics were just skipping around passes and, that was what made them so good, the 86 Celtics team. Then you have there just Jordan getting an open shot, and it's like, I don't know, man.
They weren't even guarding him on a lot of those plays. It's not even that. You're watching and Michael has they're going under every screen. There's not even a screen. It's just, they're not even guarding him. And that is what we want to talk about because this debate has started. I don't want to do the Jordan LeBron thing. I don't. It's been all over Twitter again today.
How about the Wade Pippen thing? That one's been relevant.
That we can talk about that a little bit. The Jordan LeBron thing, I'm done with it because I feel like why does this documentary on Michael Jordan have to be a referendum on LeBron James? Like to me,
that's a whole nother episode, man.
Right, and we'll talk about it at some point, but I don't want to do that today. I think what we want to get into, and I know it's peripherally related, but what you're getting into, which is. We're watching Michael, and I watched all those games. I'm older than you, okay? So I watched all those games. I obviously, watched all the games in the 90s where teams were trying to scrape out, 88 points, okay? I was at every Heat-Knicks playoff series game. I don't know why we have to disparage. To me, there's 2 ways to look at Jordan, okay? From an offensive standpoint. By the way, Michael was an incredible defensive player too. But from an offensive from an offensive standpoint, okay, the one point that's always made about Michael is in the current era where you can't touch anybody, right? Where the hand checking is made illegal, that Michael would average like 50. It's kind of like the Marino argument, right? Like where you can't hold receivers, anymore. You can't touch receivers. And so in this era, and I think Dan said it, he would throw for 60 touchdowns and like 6,000 yards. And he probably would. Okay.
Yeah, but he'd get killed by the speed of pass rushers on the edge.
He wouldn't because he had the fastest release of all time. So he'd be fine. He would be,
but okay.
He would be fine. Okay,
he'd be fine.
But the question,
I think it's a different argument, though.
The question with Michael is, which side of this do you two guys take? Do you take there's no hand checking today, so Michael would average in the 40s, all right? Or do you go the other direction and say today Michael would be going against prime Andre Iguodala, prime Klay Thompson, prime Draymond Green, prime Paul George. Kawhi, okay, and not Rick Carlisle with three strands of hair on his head. Like, is that?
Here's my thing. Michael Jordan would have figured it out in any era because he was so athletic, right? That his athleticism was beyond like the clip where he hit his head on the backboard.
ridiculous. That block was outrageous.
Guys who are 6'5" don't do that today.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my thing. His athleticism was so above and beyond anybody else. So my criticism of 80s defense isn't a criticism of Michael Jordan, because Michael Jordan would have figured it out at any time. I just want to dispel this myth that 80s defense was so tough and so incredible, and LeBron could never do what he does in the 80s. Like LeBron would murder these guys in the 80s the same way that Jordan murdered these guys in the 80s. But the same way that Jordan, if LeBron didn't have any help, he wouldn't win. The same way when Jordan didn't have any help, he didn't win. So that's my whole thing. Like, let's stop romanticizing this 80s basketball that was so, like, ridiculous and crazy. Like, Jordan did a lot of what he did in the 80s because he was an athletic freak above and beyond even the James Worthys, who I thought if you look back, James Worthy was an athletic freak. Now compare James Worthy to Michael Jordan. Like, it's two different scopes. Like, it's two different levels. But at the same time, every basketball player needs help. Now, would Jordan be dropping 60 points a game in today's NBA? Hell no. Because, yes, they can't hand check. But also a guy like Bam Adebayo can sit there and play a zone defense and just wait on Jordan to get into the lane. Like the quasi zone where guys play free safety and roam and just wait. You know, you don't have to double team early. Like you basically can wait for a guy to make his move to cross the lane and double team. Like there's a whole different style of defense. So Jordan would have figured it out, but it's not this. I think you'd have a tougher time in today's NBA, but he'd still score 30 a game. Don't get me wrong. But he'd have a tougher time in today's NBA than he did in the 80s. And you saw in the 90s when things switched up, Jordan wasn't scoring as much per game. Or he wasn't.
No, he wasn't scoring as much per game. But I think I understand what you're saying, but I also think your opinion here may be a little colored. I know you saw those games, but a little colored by the clips you just saw and not the clips you're going to see next week. Because next week, after the Rodman episode, there's going to be a lot on the Pistons.
But that's not good defense. See, that's not good. What the Pistons did to Jordan wasn't good defense because they sent him to the line.
They did send him to the line most of the time. I think there were probably plenty of times he didn't go to the line. I think those are the clips you've got to look at. Because if you go to the line, you're going to pay for it at the line, right? The same way that the Mavericks paid for it at the line when they guarded Dwayne. I look at look. We could talk about Kobe. Let's talk about Dwayne. I don't want to talk about LeBron. Let's talk about Dwayne in the context of Jordan, because Dwayne's game is more similar to Jordan's than. Do we agree on that? Than LeBron's is?
Oh, hell
right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. In the same way Kobe's was. All right. So Dwayne, look, my thing is this. Okay. Dwayne averaged that 1 year, his best year, 08, 09, the scoring title year. What did he average? 31?
Yes. Almost 31.
30.
Okay. And Michael's best year was 37, I think, right? But he was always hanging around that 30 to 32 range most of the time. I mean, look, Michael had 2 inches on Dwayne, probably 2 or 3, right? I mean, Michael's a legit 6'6". Dwayne.
Yeah, probably 3.
Dwayne
weighs 6'2", 6'3".
6'3". Michael probably has 20 pounds on Dwayne, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Michael's a better jump shooter than Dwayne. Do we agree on that?
Yeah.
Yes,
for sure.
Okay. So if Dwayne averaged 31 and as an athlete, as great an athlete as Dwayne was, we're not going to argue that he was a better athlete than Michael, right? At any stage?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. So if Dwayne averaged 31 at the peak of his powers, why wouldn't Jordan average 35 to 38, provided that his team needed him to do that?
I think he could easily get there. I think we're like, you look at what Harden is doing right now, and they're obviously very different players. Harden's whole game, is the symbol of what this whole era is all about now. It's strictly layups and threes. So it's a different style of basketball altogether. But even in that, because of the style of basketball it's being played now, where he has such an open floor, it would make things so easy for him. I think he could easily average 35. I don't think he would average 50. I think that's, just an exaggeration. But he could definitely put up some 50-pointers. It would just be a lot tougher, I feel like, to have those huge games because of the amount of athleticism there is in the defense. And like Alf said, the defenses are complex now. Like, you can do all types of different things, and depending on the players you're playing against, right? Like we look at a guy like Giannis, who everybody considers unstoppable, but you go to the playoffs and there's a defensive game plan for him. And even though Jordan didn't have, you can't compare him to Giannis at all. They don't have the same flaws or anything like that. There's always going to be a game plan, right? They're always going to try to force it out of his hands and make everybody else beat him, despite who will be on the team. So I don't think it will be something that will come to him all the time. But with the open floor that there is now, I don't doubt that he could average 35 for like 7 straight seasons if he really wanted to.
I think he could if Harden can. I mean,
I don't know.
Plus, he'd shoot the 3 more often, which would.
I don't know if he's going to
definitely shoot more threes.
Yeah, I think he would shoot more. Listen, 30, 35. I think Jordan could score in any era, right? So a lot of what I'm saying, like I said, it's not to disparage Jordan, but one of the things I will say about that quote unquote tough defense of the Pistons, what eventually got Jordan over the hump, and why he always, even as much as they battered and bruised and hit him and this, why he always excelled is the same reason Dwayne excelled in 2006, because some guys get hit and stop going to the basket. And then other guys get hit and keep going. And Jordan was one of those guys, and Dwayne was one of those guys in 2006. So I'm not going to compare the Mavericks, what they did to Dwayne, compared to what the Pistons did to Jordan. It's not even close. But there's guys who get hit and stop going in the lane. Jordan was never one of those guys. So this whole idea that the Pistons and their brutality was such a deterrent, Jordan was never scared.
No.
He was going to keep going right in there. So was Pippen. And the problem was they were just too young. To me, it wasn't the physicality of the Pistons. It was the youth of Jordan and Pippen that held them back those first few years. Once they got over that, they were done with the Pistons. It's like LeBron, and everyone.
The better comparison is the Celtics for LeBron.
Yeah, for LeBron.
That's what I'm saying. It's after a while, everyone says you have to go through that one team that's blocking you, and LeBron had to go through the big 3 Celtics. And he did.
Well, and it's like certain teams just never break through. The Pacers had to get through the big 3 Heat and couldn't. 3 straight years they couldn't do it. I mean, you have to have a special player elevate you who progresses and elevates you ahead of them. OKC might have done it to Golden State, but Durant didn't stay. Instead, he joined them. But yeah, I mean that's typically the way that this goes. Is you beat your head against the wall and you get through it. I think part of it, though, to be honest, I do agree. Part of it was because they were young. But part of it was, they had Horace Grant. He replaced Oakley. I think Rodman gave them the different dimension. And obviously at that time, Rodman was on the other side. He was with the Pistons. And, what people don't talk about with that Pistons team, you talk about the backcourt and everything, but they were just deep. They were deep. I mean, they were bringing Sally and Rodman off the bench and Vinnie Johnson. Like, that's one of the best bench cores of all time, those 3 guys. And so that was a really, really good team. I mean, it wasn't just Isaiah and Dumars and all that. But to me, the thing that separates Michael, and, I don't want to have the Michael LeBron debate, but I was talking to Shane today about LeBron's, 45-point game in Boston, and it was remarkable. And LeBron's had a lot of those games, including some of them since he's left Miami against Golden State, and obviously what he did to win the championship with Cleveland and carrying the Cavs on his back even the year that he didn't win when Kyrie and Love were hurt. But the difference with LeBron and Jordan to me, and the reason why I do agree Jordan would figure it out in any era, is because when you were going against Jordan, you knew you were losing. You knew you were losing. Like he was – I've never experienced – I was on the wrong side because I wasn't a Dolphin fan at the time. I was a Jet fan going against Marino in 84, and you just knew you were fucked, okay? It's just like – I mean, just certain guys like that, you just know it, right? With Michael, I don't know how to describe this to you, Alex. There's nobody in today's game like that.
It was Thanos. It was Thanos in the Avengers.
I believe it. I believe it because LeBron was never that. LeBron was never that. If you want to know the difference, it was Thanos in the Avengers, and it was the inevitability. Like and that
and you watched with attention, and you were like involved, but you knew that
how
there
it ended.
No shot.
Yeah, you knew how it ended. I mean, and if you look at that era, and again, I was a Knicks fan. I've acknowledged on this podcast. Like you knew, like it wasn't even about Michael. Sometimes you were just going to lose. Like Charles Smith getting blocked 4 times at the rim. Like you were going to lose. Like he was going to find a way to beat you at the end. And then you look at the teams that he beat. The teams that he beat. LeBron beat Golden State. Okay, and LeBron beat a very young but very talented Oklahoma City team, and he beat a San Antonio team that has 3 or 4 Hall of Famers on it. Okay, so yes.
Well, those are some good ones.
There are some good ones. There are also some weaker ones, but yes, there are some good ones. Okay, but if you look at what Michael did, all right. So first year he beats Magic. Okay.
That was
I know Magic
Lakers
wasn't
team.
Magic. It wasn't a great Laker team, but
and it
Magic,
was not. I mean, you had Vlade instead of Kareem.
Yeah, Vlade instead of Kareem. It was not.
And Byron Scott was hurt for most of that series.
Was he? I don't even remember that. Byron was hurt for the Pistons series where he and Magic pulled their hamstrings. They didn't have a chance. But yes, that was not a great Laker team. Okay, so I'll give you that one. But then you look. He beat what I thought was a really good Suns team with the league MVP on it. In Barkley.
He did. That was a good team.
Really good team. A really good Sonics team. Really good Sonics team. Okay. Kemp, when Kemp was Kemp. Peyton at sort of his peak. Hersey Hawkins, Detlef Schrempf. That was a really good team. That Portland team was an excellent team. Drexler, Porter, Buck Williams, Duckworth.
That Portland team might have been the best team.
There was a terrific team, and Clyde was incredible in that series. And Clyde at the time might have been the second best player in the NBA. So that was a tremendous, tremendous team. So he beat those teams, and then he beat a very good Utah team twice. Okay, yes. At the end, a very good Utah team with Stockton, Malone, Hornacek. Byron Russell was okay, Ostertag, but I mean that was a very, very complete team that knew that was extraordinarily well coached and knew what it was doing. So, but you knew he was going to win, like. One way or another, whether he was pushing off or had the flu or it didn't matter. Like he was going to win. That feeling of inevitability doesn't exist with LeBron to that degree. And but to me,
maybe LeBron was just that for the East.
Yes. Yes. Probably.
But I also think I don't know. Did that 2014 Spurs team? The 2007 Spurs team, Jordan's team was terrible. I mean, LeBron's team was terrible.
Yes.
Now the 2014 Spurs team was really good. That was a young Kawhi, Duncan, all the Spurs legends, and that Golden State team. I don't know if Jordan's Bulls could have beat that team.
Well, totally different style. I was thinking about that last night. It's actually an interesting debate, so maybe we'll close with that. Take the best Bulls team.
That's an easy one.
Well, let's go through it though. Take the best Bulls team. Was what? Longley at center, Rodman at the 4, Pippen, Jordan. Was it Kerr? BJ was still there, right? So maybe BJ Armstrong. He always had a collection of kind of Mario Chalmers types playing the point, right? Like spot up shooters.
BJ Armstrong.
BJ Armstrong was there. And Kukoc, right? Okay, Kukoc, who was a pretty damn good player. Actually, in these days, Tony would get a lot more flexibility. He wasn't Doncic, but he was pretty good. Okay, he was really. He
was
good.
Better than Gallo.
Yes,
I think he's a step up from Gallinari.
He's a step up from Gallinari. I would agree. That's the closest comp. He's a better playmaker than Gallinari.
Yes,
but he and I think we saw it the year that Jordan was out and Pippen and Kukoc led that team that he was a very capable number 2 if he needed to be. So you take that team against the best Warriors team. Who guards Jordan? Clay?
Yep. And he's going to do a decent enough job.
Yep. And then who guards Scotty? Draymond or Durant?
Draymond
for sure.
And then Scotty's guarding.
You let KD help off of Rodman all day, and it's gonna. That's not easy,
dude. The fact that the Durant thing kind of just I don't want to hear it.
Yeah,
I don't want to hear it. Durant.
I just can't imagine that team guarding the Warriors. Like, imagine it just wasn't. It's not fair. Like, it's not a fair conversation. Like you said, the styles are so drastically different that it's like that Bulls team could not keep up with the Warriors if they were playing with today's rules. Like, there's no way they could.
And I'm going to say the same thing about the Big Three Heat team. The Big Three Heat team against the Warriors with Durant. It wasn't fair. It was a cheat code. Like, it's not.
Who would guard Curry on the Bulls, Jordan or Pippen?
Oh, Jordan. They would have.
You're not putting BJ Armstrong on him, are you?
No. Well, No.
You know what I'm forgetting? They had Ron Harper. They had Ron.
Oh,
Harper.
See, exactly. Ron Harper.
Ron could still defend. He wasn't an offensive player by the end of his career, but he could still defend.
That's one of those things where they talk about how Jordan did it by himself. Which, if you watch yesterday, it was glaringly obvious that Jordan didn't do shit by himself. Like, he had a really good team. And Ron Harper, you talk about how Byron Scott came over. I believe Ron Harper came from the Clippers as well.
Yeah.
You talk about how Byron Scott came from the Clippers and was an amazing player. Ron Harper was one of the best scorers in the league.
But he wasn't the same by the time he got to the Bulls. I understand that. He was a different player. Like, you're right. With the Clippers on bad teams, and a couple of teams were pretty good, on generally bad teams. He had the 1 year with Larry Brown. He was a guy who averaged like 24. I mean, he and filled up the rest of the box score. Like, he was a very complete player. By the time he got to the Bulls, the knees were shot, but he was a very, very smart, savvy defender. And he was
Iguodala.
Moved.
He was very much an Iguodala, yes.
Yeah, he was a very competent player, and he wasn't really a point guard, but he started at point guard, similarly to kind of a lot of the guys who started at point guard with LeBron or Dwayne over the years. And he was productive. And here's the other thing. He was long, and that's the other reason why I think you're discounting them a little bit against the Warriors because
they had length.
They have length. With Pippen, Jordan, and Harper, I mean,
you would have to shorten that rotation a lot, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's certain guys you couldn't play, right? You couldn't play Steve Kerr against Steve Kerr's Warriors, right? I don't think that would work.
No,
or any of the previous guys, John Paxson, or
they would try to stick him on Iguodala, and then on Livingston, and Livingston would just cook him in the post.
Pretty much, probably wanted to do that in practice. Yeah, you couldn't do that, but look, the Warriors didn't have a big to worry about. Really. So, Luke Longley would be fine. You could probably play small with Rodman at the 5.
The thing was that the Warriors would always play. They were the ones who started to really play off, these big, slower centers off of the floor. Mm-hmm. They were the ones to do it the most. So that's why I think these guys could play, but it would just have to be.
Whoa. Can you give the Heat credit for that?
No, but I'm just saying the Warriors took it to the max. Where you just couldn't do it.
The death lineup late in games. You could once Draymond went in at the 5. It was. I mean, you couldn't play a big.
Exactly. The Warriors would turn Wennington into what Andrew Bogut was for the Warriors. They would just play the first few minutes, and then the first few minutes of the third maybe, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean the Bulls never had great centers. Longley was the best of them.
What about Cartwright? Cartwright was old,
but Cartwright was done by the time he got there. Like, Bill was a good offensive player with the Knicks, but by the time he got there, he wasn't great. I mean, they needed to make the Oakley trade. It's interesting. I think as we do this era stuff, again, you have to account for how players would progress and be different. If Michael was in this era, he was never a great 3-point shooter. I think he would have made himself a pretty good 3-point shooter.
Definitely.
LeBron was not a good 3-point shooter when he first came into the NBA.
And Jordan had a pure jump shot as far as the mid-range. So that's why I would have had way more trust in him to develop the 3. And LeBron developed.
Pippen would have turned into a great 3-point shooter.
Yes.
I
was looking, he had some decent, he was taking 4 or 5 threes a game back then and shooting about 35%. So I'm like, I wouldn't be worried at all about Pippen as a shooter either.
Pippen would have turned himself into a great 3-point shooter. He would have been Andre Iguodala on steroids. Like, it really would.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Let's close with that. That was going to be because I want to talk more about Scotty if we do this again, because I think Scotty's one of the most underrated players in NBA history. I think he gets
absolutely.
I think he gets a bad rap because
bit of a diva, huh?
He was a bit of a diva, and that year, what he's always remembered for, it's not just that situation, but he's remembered for the year that Jordan wasn't there, and the Bulls won 55 games with Pete Myers, of all people, playing the 2 because Scotty and Kukoc carried them. 55 games after losing Michael Jordan. I mean, look what happened to Cleveland when they lost LeBron. It's amazing. They were 55-27. I mean, look what happened to the Heat when they lost LeBron. But Scotty, there was the playoff game against the Knicks that he refused to go back in the game because the play was designed for Kukoc. And to me, that colored a lot of the Scottie Pippen talk because that was the year that he took the reins as their best player, and he was an MVP candidate the entire season. And then when it mattered, he got pissy. Okay?
I mean, the way they were explaining his come up, a lot of people probably like me definitely didn't know about his come up in Arkansas. And, him growing up and wanting to be like Dr. J. And he even says it in the doc because it was important to him to kind of be that guy. And that one season, I guess, where he got to be that guy, he won 55 games without Jordan. And then, boom, they run a play for Kukoc when it really matters. And then he could have handled it better. I understand where he was coming from. He could have definitely handled it better. That's for sure.
Not his best moment, but the contract thing is ridiculous. The other thing people don't realize is these days everybody's like, why don't you renegotiate the contract? The NBA contracts these days, you can't renegotiate. The teams cannot renegotiate them. But that was the trade-off for them being so short. In the old days, you could go up to 7 years. And so that's why Pippen signed that ridiculous like $3 million a year contract, and everybody passed him. I think the year after, like Larry Johnson signed for $84 million, like and Scotty was making 22, not per year total. And so, but Reinsdorf could have, as he said in the episode, could have renegotiated it. He wouldn't. And I think what we've seen is like they killed their own dynasty. They just destroyed it. I think that's what's, this whole thing is about. But it's interesting stuff.
I just didn't understand it at the end when they were saying how it was so obvious that was going to be their last year. I'm like, they're still winning championships. It's not like the Celtics, like, they were losing in the second round. They won like 5-0 in their past 5. Like, I just didn't understand it at all. But I guess there was more to it behind the scenes.
Well, it was what they talked about.
I can't wait for next episode to see if Scotty gets traded.
No, he doesn't. He comes back. No, he comes.
That was the joke, man.
I know. Yeah. He comes, but you saw what Tracy McGrady said though. He said that he would have been traded for him, but he was so young at the time, and Michael was older. They would have been great together, because, what is the Scottie Pippen comp these days? I said it was Kawhi. Is that the closest? He's not.
That is the closest. Yeah. Because you got to imagine Scotty with his own team,
right?
And we saw it for 2 years, and he was Kawhi.
Yeah, he was.
He was absolutely Kawhi.
Yeah, he filled up the box score, man.
I saw him hitting those turnarounds in some of those clips last night, man. Oof.
He was really good. He was really good. Like when people talk about the best small forwards of all time, like he's not talked about, and I don't.
That Kawhi comparison is perfect. Just the way that he defended. Mm. And, like, his speed laterally, the fact that he had guard skills how tall was Scotty? 6'8"?
Yeah, he's a better playmaker than Kawhi.
Definitely.
You think so? I think they're close.
Kawhi has become a better playmaker. I think we saw that in the game down here.
But he's
never been a high assist guy.
He didn't play the point forward like Scotty did.
He never had those guard skills until a couple of years ago, I think, when he could really start demanding an offense and do it all the time. I feel like before those last couple of years with the Spurs, he didn't really have that in his game.
I think he has more physicality than Pippen, but Scotty was kind of wiry strong. I don't think he got enough credit for that. Like you mentioned the Pistons series, but he was Scotty was tremendous. Like I said, the most years Scotty, you could have made an argument, was the second best player in the NBA to the guy on his own team, and just has not gotten any credit for it. I did see that Larsa Pippen came out and is telling people don't feel sorry for Scotty, and actually took a screenshot of his basketball reference page with how much money he's made. And of course they're giving her a hard time because if you know the history there. Are you guys familiar? Yeah, you guys are familiar with that. So I think that's not.
You're not? Let's get over that part.
That's one of those things I don't care.
Future is like somehow involved. But either way, okay, so we're talking about Scottie Pippen. You take him as a number 2 over Dwayne Wade? And what those guys did as number 2 players is what I'm saying, more so than their careers.
Yes, because Dwayne was not Dwayne. The first year of Dwayne with LeBron, yes, but the last 3 years, no. Dwayne was a better fit. Pippen was a better fit for Jordan than Dwayne was for LeBron, because Dwayne and LeBron overlapped so much and needed the ball in their hands all the time, whereas Scotty and Michael were able to play off of each other. And Michael, look, certain players are just perfect complements for the other, and Scotty was the perfect complement for Michael. He was longer than Michael. He didn't demand the ball as much as Michael did. He did all the dirty work stuff. That's not LeBron and Dwayne. That's a little bit different.
Now, so what year was it when Pippen came to play with Jordan?
87, I think.
Yeah,
so it was his fourth year.
Fourth year, yeah, because he was the 5th pick overall, but traded from Seattle for Olden Polynice.
So you got to think of Dwayne Wade and LeBron, like Dwayne Wade and LeBron playing in their absolute primes together.
Oof, my God.
Exactly.
Like
so
0809 would have been it, right? 0809 because that was about.
My God.
Yeah.
It's 0809 Wade and like 12-13 Bron, like playing together at the same time.
Yeah.
Like it's not the same comparison at all.
Against Rick Carlisle. Yeah.
Well, listen, LeBron and Wade
Jerry Seastig and Scott Wedman
already lost to Rick Carlisle.
If you get past Rick Carlisle, Bill Walton's there with bad feet waiting for you in the lane. So
your issue out there, just too many white dudes on the floor for them last night.
Well, listen, I wasn't going to say it, but the game has evolved is all, is all I'll say. Like, you know what I was thinking today? Jay Crowder would have been like one of the biggest, baddest linebackers in the world in like the 80s and 90s, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And now he plays basketball.
What about Zion?
Oh, my God.
Too.
What would Zion have been in the 80s? A freak. He'd be – honestly, I think he'd probably bigger than Moses Malone.
Hold on. How about, who would have been a better football player, even if they played different positions? Russell Westbrook or Zion in their athletic primes?
Oh, my God, Russell Westbrook. Jeez. Russell Westbrook is how tall, 6'2"?
He's like 6'3".
Could you imagine him as a wide receiver?
Well, I was thinking about him as a running back.
Running back?
As a running back. He's built like LaShawn McCoy.
He would jump over people at the goal line.
He's too tall.
Well, that's the other thing with NBA players is sometimes because we see them up against taller players than them, and we forget how tall they are. So like NBA guards, like Steph Curry's 6'3", right? He looks like a child. Like he's 6'3". Like, you know,
by the way, you want to talk about the way that this
same
game
height as DeAndre Hopkins.
You want to talk about the way this game has evolved since Jordan was drafted? You saw how in that doc they were saying that they couldn't really take Jordan over Hakeem or Bowie because you just couldn't take a guard over a big to build your
exactly.
team. I thought that was hilarious because it was like blasphemous to pick a guard over a big. Like you can't build your team around a guard over you have to pick Hakeem over him or Bowie over him.
Well, one of the things that was funny when you talk about the way the game has changed and evolved, and LeBatard used to say this all the time and quote this: Bill Russell is the same size as James Jones.
Yeah.
Same height, same weight as James Jones. Yeah. Not James Johnson.
James Jones.
Skinny James Jones. Like James Jones in the 60s would have been the most dominant center in the NBA. Right? So now, and I think like Sedano was all over me today talking about we have to take errors into consideration. I'm like, I know what you're trying to say, Sedano, and it makes a lot of sense. But when you're talking about the 80s, there was a paradigm shift, and I think Jordan is the reason for it, where athleticism became so much more important than anything else when it came to the NBA. Like IQ is important, all the shooting is important, but at the same time, you realize you have to have athletes on the floor because guys like Michael Jordan were going to run over your Danny Ainges and Rick Carlisles. Like you can't have a bench full of guys who look like they could be house painters. Like you just can't do it.
But the other way the philosophy has changed, Alf, like what you guys are talking about is not building around a big these days, whereas you would have before. But also it was like blasphemy at the time. Like, well, you can't, and I understand because I remember it at the time. Portland couldn't take Jordan because they had Drexler. Like
that's hilarious to me because now you're like you play those two together.
You would put one at small forward and just
exactly. Well, I mean, why couldn't Drexler do what Paul George is doing with Kawhi or vice versa? Like it's. I mean, that's the way the game is now. But that was the ultimate example of drafting for need, which is the stupidest philosophy in sports. You don't draft for need.
Listen, and then they made the same mistake with Greg Oden.
They made the same mistake, but it's not just that. I remember, and I always give him. Well, let's close here, okay? But I always give him a hard time because Lebitard's column on the night that Dwayne Wade was drafted was they already have Eddie Jones, and it's like, no. get the guy who's great and then figure it out, right? And so what did they do? They moved Dwayne to the point. Okay. And then eventually when Eddie was moved out, they moved him to the 2. But like the idea that Drexler and Jordan couldn't play together.
Oh my God. Could you imagine?
And Clyde was entering his prime there. So, I mean, Clyde was we've been gushing all over Pippen. Clyde was a more skilled offensive player than Scottie. And just as good a rebounder and did just virtually everything else on the floor as well, except
that probably would have been more like Wade LeBron, right?
Can we talk about like why did Clyde look like he was 50 in high school? Like I don't understand what happened.
All of these players did.
I don't understand what happened. What was going on in the 80s? Like why did everyone have a cul-de-sac at 22? Like what was going on?
All right, we're gonna end.
Tell me, Alf.
Was it because of crack?
This is going like your streaming episode that went for 6.5 hours. We're ending now. Follow Apollo.
I think it was the cocaine. Ethan was the cocaine.
Well, Jordan talked about that. He was talking about earlier.
Yeah. Also, Jordan walked into a party with cocaine, liquor, and strippers, and it was like, no, not for me, guys.
Not for me.
I'm sure he just walked out.
Sure.
Later in life, perhaps. ApolloLeaf.com. Get 25% off by using the code HEAT. And obviously check out all of our other sponsors, Lessons Via Leaders, podcast, LouisPeters.com, Seltzer Mayberg, and more. We'll talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons of Sports Network.